On this week's podcast, we are discussing relationship dynamics with children with PDA. My guests this week are Beth Elkins and Ian Thorsteinsson. Beth is the head teacher at Gretton School, an independent school for autistic students, and Beth has worked in SEND for more than 25 years, working with a variety of needs. Beth is also a parent of a young man with PDA. Beth's passion for specialist education runs through both personal and professional life, with the aim of making a positive difference in the lives of as many young people as possible. Ian is the executive principal of Gretton School and some of the other schools in the Cavendish Group, and Ian has worked in SEND since 2004, and before that he was in the Navy. Ian has worked internationally supporting SEND, and he took me for a nice steak in Dubai many years ago. And he is passionate about life chances, removing barriers, and driving change around the support students with SEND need to thrive. Welcome to the show, Beth and Ian.
Thank you.
Thank
Morning.
you very much. Nice welcome. It was a great steak, though, wasn't it?
It was. All of them were. I've never been to a eat as much as you want steak restaurant before.
No, with all the meat fresh in from Australia that morning. Brilliant.
Yes,
should go back.
it was amazing.
I could afford the flight.
For any listeners, I'm a token vegetarian in this conversation. So.
I think in one night we've probably offset about a year's worth of vegetarianism.
I can guarantee it.
Lovely to hear you're doing your part. Thank you.
We have recorded a couple of podcasts around PDA already, and I know people want more. And I think every parent of a PDA child and every professional working with a PDA child will always welcome more support and advice. And especially, Beth, from you, who has someone of experience with that personal and professional. So where do we start?
Great question. Where do we start? Where do we start?
Well, Ian said at the end.
At the end, I know he said at the end. Well, it's probably a very good place to start because I am now the parent of a 20-year-old, and he's still PDA, and I wouldn't have him any other way. But when he was 3 and we were being ejected from Tumble Tots and the library and being asked to leave and do the walk of shame, I think at that point I wasn't really enjoying parenting very much, and I found it really difficult. And so if I meet a parent now of a child who they suspect is PDA or has a diagnosis of PDA, I would say to them, hold on, just hold on, because actually there is true joy to come if you can see your way to thinking differently and to being different with your child, because that's what they need. And there's a reason why you've been chosen for them. You've just got to grow into that. So I suppose that's where I'd start with any parent who's got a child with PDA, because I now have such joy in it. I just wouldn't want to change the life that I have.
So a 20-year-old with PDA, you're still having to follow the same things. You can't tell them to put their shoes on. All of that is still exactly the same. Or has he kind of learnt how to deal with it more? Is it a combination of both?
Well, no, I mean, no, he still cannot. He's still absolutely inured in a river of anxiety about what life is going to expect of him, to the point where actually he hasn't spoken at all for the last, must be 7 years now. He doesn't speak. He can speak, but he doesn't. And so selective mutism is just another really key indicator of profound anxiety. And I think when I started to understand that PDA is an anxiety disorder, really, it's a response to just being overwhelmed by every encounter, I started to approach it in a very different way. And that's what I do at the school as well. My view is that the biggest issue with managing PDA is the expectations that adults have for themselves or hold over themselves. I think that adults who work with young people with PDA often feel very powerless. They feel very judged. I mean, I can't now number the times we've had comments in public places by total strangers because my son was behaving in a particular way, and I really chuckle about it now. There have been some hilarious incidents where Archie has just done his thing in a shop or whatever, and I can think back now. I mean, I must write a book one day just to share with other parents these incidents that we've had with him. But I remember the sweat of the times, when we've had these moments where people have definitely made comments and judged us for the way that he's behaved. But the truth is that we were given a very individual young person who needed something very individual to parent him.
And I think it's important to say that judgment extends into family as well. It's not just public, is it? I think that
No.
you're constantly fighting the judgment of people who don't understand the specific challenges that are faced and will try and force your experience or the outcomes of that experience into a framework that they understand, which was often a typically developed parent-child relationship, which it definitely doesn't fit.
I mean, it took us a little bit of time. He was my only. He is my only child. He was my only child. I'd never parented before, and your life shifts, doesn't it, completely from before you were a parent and after you're a parent. And if you are a parent of a neurodiverse child, you're looking at all these kind of parenting books, just as any parent does when they start for the first time to be a parent, and finding that they are utterly useless, except maybe to prop a table up. I remember reading Gina Ford Contented Little Baby book, and I had a ritual burning of it eventually because I was like, this isn't working. It's not working. It was immensely stressful at the time. So I suppose the first message to anybody is you've got to let go of the argument that I'm not doing it right, because you can't do it that way. You need to parent the child that you have. And when you parent the child that you have, you start to unlock the most wonderfulness, the wonder of your child, because you're giving them what they need. So that's the first bit, I suppose. And we talk about kind of relational dynamics in children with PDA. I suppose the thing that I do at school is to say to the staff, when you're working with a child, you can absorb energies, can't you? Do you know what I mean? When you're working with anybody, or you're in a room where there's a real kind of dense atmosphere, you absorb it, don't you?
Yeah.
It's just a human being, you do that. And when you're working with children with communication that comes in a different way, sometimes after sort of 15 minutes of working with them, where maybe you were coming into school, singing a song, getting your toast, feeling great, everything's wonderful, and within 15 minutes you're starting to feel a bit peculiar, you're starting to feel quite anxious and worried, I would say to staff, look at how you're feeling when you've worked with a child for a little bit of time, because it will tell you how they are. So often the empathy that flows through the people who work in this school just means they're absorbing the energies of the children that they're working with. So suddenly they're starting to feel really fretful and really anxious, because that's how the child they're working with feels. So I said, if you can do that, you become an incredibly powerful advocate for that young person, because if you're feeling a bit worried and a bit anxious, you can apply what you need to them. So you start to make them feel comfortable, and it's okay, we're all right. I think you might be feeling a bit worried at the moment. What would help? Do you need a blanket? Do you need to go under your desk? Do you need something to drink? What would regulate you? Go on the swings, go for a stomp. Whatever it is, you can suddenly start to interpret a learner's feelings because of the way that you're feeling. When you transfer that to parenting, you're absorbing your child's anxiety all day, every day, and it's really hard to get the space from it to be able to think rationally. So I'd say to parents, try and find a place where you can sit really quietly and think, right, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? If it is because that's how they're feeling, what will they need? And you start to unlock a little bit of how when you start to reduce their anxiety, you unlock their ability.
I think with all parents, you go through that journey of them coming home from hospital and looking at your child going, now what?
What do I do? There's no manual.
And then you buy a parenting book or you watch stuff and you read it, and then this will happen, and you're going, where's the chapter of when that doesn't happen? And you have all these books and all this advice thrown at you, and at some point, well, for me anyway, and I don't know if this is just for my children is you learn that a lot of this stuff doesn't actually work.
Mm.
But if you followed their rules, it gave you confidence because I'm doing it the way I'm supposed to do it.
Mm.
And then when you find it doesn't work, you're now going, now what?
Mm.
And it's getting that confidence from how your child is responding to what you're doing. It takes a while to build that, but it is yeah. And I remember being the only parent in the playground on a winter's day when there's snow on the ground and I'm in a t-shirt because I'm actually not cold. Although there is snow, the sun's out and I'm warm. And there's my daughter running around in nursery, in the playground, in a t-shirt, and I'm getting looks off everyone. And I'm going, I stick my fingers down the back of her neck. She's warm. But that judgment from everyone else was there. And that was just about whether or not my daughter should have a coat on.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And I'm quite good. Where I am, I generally don't really care about authority that much anyway. I don't know if I was going to ask you, Ian, you were talking about in our previous podcast about being dyslexic and just weighing things up and being expelled. Did you see that head teacher as a really scary hire, or did you just see them as someone else with an opinion?
Exactly that. Everyone just had an opinion, and clearly they were all wrong, in my opinion. And I don't think I've really moved on from that. You'll have to ask Beth, but I think that's pretty much how I've lived my life ever since.
I'm saying nothing.
So because when I've had these conversations about PDA and they're going, it's just someone else with an opinion, I'm going, yeah, actually, I'm 99% on board with that. And I have been my entire life that I was never really scared of head teachers. I get told off. And it had no impact on me. But it also means I'm quite courageous in I will do what I want and I don't get anyone else's thing because their opinion doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Which has helped me do different things. But I think not every parent has that courage. They want to conform because conforming as human nature gives you comfort. But when you can't conform because your child is doing something they shouldn't and you can't stop them, then that's going to really...
Oh, it hits really hard. I mean, my own personal upbringing is that I am the daughter of a vicar, a Church of England minister. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Viz, but he was like the archetypal Victorian dad. So when I had my child who literally would do nothing that he was told, it created some real ripples in the family because I was the parent who wasn't getting it right out of my siblings. I think I probably did go there. I went to quite a dark place for a while, because people do have expectations that if you are that child's parents, that child, when they're not behaving correctly, you will take steps to make sure that they do. And actually, when you then go, okay, well, I'll do 1, 2, 3 magic, that should work. It doesn't, by the way, with PDA children, just in case you were in any doubt about that. I'll do naughty step, or I'll do, you do this sort of traditional extrinsic application of punishment and consequence and find that it becomes twice as difficult, twice as adversarial, twice as confrontational. So suddenly you're looking around and that people are judging you. I mean, I've been tutted out more times than I could list. So I suppose the first message for any parent in this situation would be go your own way. You've got your own child. Nobody's going to walk a mile in your shoes. You know what they need. Take courage in that. That's the first thing. But then you start to, I've got a van reversing in the car park.
That's something about podcasting with you, Beth, and reversing Laura's.
I'm so sorry. It's the car park. I apologise. But what's become, as you said, it's to do with confidence. If I apply this method that I've read about and it works and it brings about the results that I'm looking for, I gain in confidence in my parenting. Yep. Therefore, the opposite is true. If I see this behaviour, I apply this parenting method and it's completely does the opposite, my confidence goes down, and you keep losing confidence and realise that you must be the worst parent in the world because you've got the worst behaved child in the world, and therefore you cannot recover from that position. The truth is, if you shift things and you do things completely differently, you suddenly tap into this amazing young person who suddenly feels confident and comfortable in your presence. So, yeah, the first message is absolutely let go of any expectation of anybody else. They do not walk a mile in your shoes. And then you start to work with young people with PDA, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I just love them. They are so creative. They are so passionate. They'd work 10 times harder to avoid the thing that you want them to do than they would need to expend doing the thing. And if you can look at them as a young person who is immensely vulnerable, immensely anxious, and you start to put things in place to enable them to explore what they need, it becomes just a billion times easier. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. So we've done this training at school before now where I've said, you've got to get somewhere between the box and the field. I'll explain. The box is you have this one choice, here it is, and the child will do anything at all to avoid being in the box. If you give them the field, you have no capacity to understand where they're going to end up, and that will make you feel powerless. So as a PDA parent, you have got to guide yourself somewhere between the box and the field, provide choice, provide options, provide power and a sense of control whilst you are maintaining this span of control that you're giving them. So instead of saying, right, you're hungry, help yourself to anything in the kitchen, you might say, what would you like, carrot or celery? So you're still directing them to something healthy. I mean, why anybody would choose celery, I can't
Can I
even
just say
begin
that
to
if you
imagine.
gave me those two options, I would probably eat everything else in the kitchen because those options
Yes, I
wouldn't
know
go
you
very
will.
well.
Well, exactly. So, but actually you work that out about your child, don't you? You
Yep.
work that out about your child. So when we, at the school that we're at, so Gretton School, I've already encountered parents saying, do you take PDA kids because nowhere else will? I mean, that's horrific, isn't it?
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, I love them. I love them. Bring them here. Because actually, we have been able to set up a school which is so heavily based on the power of individual relationships that it's the relationships that allow that comfort for a young person with PDA so that they then do start to be able to lead their own dance, do their own thing, learn what they want to learn. By letting go of the fight disappears, actually.
So yeah, I think that field in the box is like you're not asking an open-ended question.
No.
You're not asking them. There is only one answer.
No.
You're playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you have a choice of 4.
Yeah.
Give them a choice of 2, 3, or 4 that you, as you said, you're in control of. You're kind of setting the remit, but the ultimate decision, they have the power. But it's still within that control you've given them.
Yeah. Because actually, the field can make them also feel incredibly unsafe.
Yes.
Really unsafe. Your boundaries, I call them wobbly walls. I'm setting my boundaries absolutely firmly here, and then I'm stepping well inside them to give the child some wobble so that they can keep pushing, but they won't necessarily push to the stiff walls that I've created in my mind. It's also about trusting young people that actually, why would I know what's best for them more than they know?
Yep.
Because actually our young people do know what makes them feel safe and what makes them feel secure. They are trying to push. They do try and push. They want to know boundaries just the same as everybody else. But those boundaries need to feel like they've set them themselves. So really early on as parents, we learnt anti-parenting. That's what I call it.
What's
How to do things
anti-parenting?
anti-parenting, how to do things completely the opposite of how you would expect. So instead of responding to poor behaviour and punishing, we ignored it, tactical ignoring, walking away, removing attention, removing any kind of input. But when there was some really lovely playing going on, or they'd made a really good choice, lots and lots of not too much praise, because there's you can overdo it, but interaction and interest and letting them lead the play in a way that they want to. So I would literally just, when I started to see the behaviour getting really difficult, I'd literally just stand up, walk away, and turn my back. and I would find that the behaviour stopped really quickly, and I was like, I thought I found some amazing secret. Shh, don't tell anybody, but this really works. It's amazing. And then what you found, that the time that you did spend with the child was in play and fun, and you were enjoying yourself. So we lost the fight. I mean, I remember one summer when we were really trying to, right, we're gonna knock this behaviour on the head. You know, everybody's telling us that we're doing a really bad job of it. We're gonna nail this down. We're gonna do a lot better. Well, he spent most of the summer on the naughty step, and I was crying around the corner. And I said, "What was my husband doing?" He said, "Oh, I was in the cupboard under the stairs, roaring like a pirate." It's so frustrating. We were just not getting anywhere, and I think that's a really interesting message for parents, is that you can keep applying the traditional parenting methods, but what on earth is the point if they're not bringing about the behaviour that you want to see? It's just flogging a dead horse. That's absolutely pointless.
If it's almost working, you can feel we're almost there type thing, then maybe. But when one of you's on the naughty step again and again and again, and the other one of you crying around the corner, it's like, yeah,
This
if you
is not
stepped
going to
back,
work.
you would have gone,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here, but whatever it is, it needs to stop.
Yeah, it's madness. Yeah. And that's when I got really, really interested in reading about different approaches for different young people. And it's been absolutely embedded in me since then. We've all gone through a learning curve, I think, unless you're born knowing how to do this thing. There's a lot of reading to be done to figure out why these young people need something different, and how you can do that. But when we talk about kind of relational dynamics with children with PDA, it means you've got to change. You've got to change in order to allow them to do that, which is why I'm such a believer in specialist education, because I think a lot of mainstream schools end up down a pathway of doing things the way that their managers say that they do things, and there's a traditional behavioural approach. These young people need something very, very different, and therefore the specialist education allows us to be that flexible group of people responding in a different and flexible way in order to reduce the anxiety that these young people are feeling and experiencing, because it's the anxiety that then creates the behaviour.
I think ultimately mainstream schools and specialist schools they're not completely different in the pupils that are there. The biggest difference to me is that mainstream school judges their success purely on exams and nothing else.
That's because they're told they have to. It's a very
to.
narrow path for them. Yeah.
And as we're in a very much purely 100% exam based, it's all about getting the answer, not how you got to the answer, not what you learned as you found out the answer. It's just purely, this is the answer, let's move on. It's not very knowledge based, very boring. What you're doing is you are actually building individuals.
Yes.
You are building individuals.
And they're so individual. That's what's really, really wonderful. We don't want kind of homogenous groups of people, trotting out of school with their uniforms on. I mean, I've had young people come into school in their pyjamas. Come to school in your pyjamas. But you still come to school because we do learning, and because you need learning, and because you deserve it.
And at some point, the wearing pyjamas might change.
Well, it does. The first day she came into pyjamas, she was like, I feel a bit silly and I don't want to do this again. And that was fine. We didn't have the battle again.
But that's the thing, is you're building individuals who are going to function in society, but you still identify them within the society. You identify every single one of them. They're all doing it their way, but they're fitting in with society. Whereas I do feel that sometimes with mainstream is they go out into society, but they don't know how to access it because it's so different to what they had in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
They might have some GCSEs, they might get some A-levels. They go into the real world and it's like, this is not the same as school. They've not been prepared. And I think in the specialist, there are very academic schools. You talk about getting GCSEs and things like that, and there are less academic. But overall, you're building children and individuals who are going to be able to be and access that society in a way that works for them.
Yeah, I mean, Ian has spoken before about, the application of extrinsic punishment, sanctions, as being really, really ineffective with this group of people. I mean, you probably would say it a lot better than me, Ian.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's when someone needs to adapt and adapt themselves in order to thrive in society, but also adapt society to be able to work with them. If we produce young people that leave us at the end of their school time with us with the certificates that we absolutely want them to have and need them to have to access the next gate of their life, but if the expectation is that we employ extrinsic behavior management techniques in order to be able to get them to that point, the only people that are going to do that for them after they've left school is likely to be the police or the criminal justice system. So our job from the first day that they come in is to work out how we can make that intrinsic to them. How do we get them to want to be able to do it for themselves and to understand why they're doing it and why it's good for them to do it, in order for them to get to the point where they leave us with exams, hopefully, and certificates, but with an understanding and an ability and a desire to want to adapt to the next steps of their life so they can be successful in it rather than reject it and expect other people to manage it for them. And I think it's critical and links back to the other podcast really around the relational practice. Once we take away the egos of the adults in the room, again, takeaway is a bit strong. Once we work with the adults in the room to reduce their that's when approaches to every young person in the school becomes possible, whether it's PDA, whether it's classic autism, whether it's ADHD, whether it's dyslexia. If we're alongside that young person and we're co-regulating with them and we're able to move forward together, that all of those barriers fall over because we're automatically and in real time adapting to what their needs are at that time.
I mean, all that's occurred in the news lately around the riots and things, I'm intrigued by the fact that when behaviour becomes more and more extreme, all we have to manage it is physical.
Yeah.
Weaponry, restraint, blah, blah, blah. And I recall a time when we were trying to get my young man in the bath one night and could you just get in the bath, please? I've asked you 19 times. He's like, well, actually, you've only asked me 14 times. And I thought, where am I left with? What am I left with? I'm literally left with a physical wrestle with a 6-year-old to get them naked in the bath. Am I going to go there? Am I going to go down the physical route? There must be something else. And the truth is, Dale, all we have is language. That's all we have, really. Unless we go physical, we only have language. We have the way that we interact with a young person. Do they feel safe enough to take risk? Do they feel safe enough to manage that anxiety and do the thing anyway, knowing that you're going to catch them if they fall? That's all we have as a parent and as a teacher, realistically, unless we want to get physical, which I do not want to do.
But if you got physical, if you managed to get your child 6 years old into the bath, next time he's not even going to go near the bathroom.
Correct.
For you to fight him for there.
Correct.
If you then get him, you're going to. It's going to get literally. The fight will start further from the bath. It will start further and further. He will also learn from every single trick you use on how to get him into the bath, and he will learn defenses.
Oh, he's a master.
Yes, I'm that sort of thing. I didn't have those sort of fights, but I know I learn, I watch, I improve, I adapt, I overcome type stuff. But you know that it will only have to get worse. Yeah, to the point you're going to go, actually, we have to get a straitjacket. And then it always escalates until when? Until when can you stop escalating? The moment you take, my parents used to smack me. I deserved it, probably. Whether or not smacking was the answer, very different question. But I learned quite quickly that this was it. This is the end. They cannot escalate it legally.
Yeah.
So going back to what Ian said is it worth it? If I do this, I'm going to get smacked and this will happen. Yeah, it's worth it. got smacked. It didn't impact me because they couldn't escalate.
And that's the truth of it. That is the truth. That is the truth. That's what you've got. So you can sit there and say, I can apply another sanction. I can get more extreme. The adversary will increase. The anger, the powerlessness will escalate.
And what's the purpose of a
And
bath? Because even if you physically got him in the bath, he was not coming out any cleaner, is he? So what are you actually trying to fight?
he was humming a bit, Ian,
Well,
I've
yeah,
got to
but
say.
splashing him in the water just before he jumps back out again ain't going to fix that, is it?
Well, no, exactly. And so you've got to then get
Yeah.
to, and this is where I think a lot of parents, and it's honestly, it's a really, really bitter pill to swallow at times. I have to say, it's really tough. Why do I have the child who is actively fighting me about every single thing, even things that I know they'll like? It feels like the cutting off your nose to spite your face syndrome. But if you let go of that battle in you to be different and accept the child you have, life gets easier, better, more funny, more pleasurable for everybody. So that's your first step, really. And then how do you create an environment that feels so calm and so demand free that actually they can start to thrive? That's the challenge. It's beautiful when it happens. Like, honestly, it really, really is. If you let go of the battle in your own self, thinking I'm not doing a good enough job, the phrase you need to use is I'm doing the job they need. And it's really wonderful when it happens, because when you start to anti-parent, you walk away when you're seeing behaviour that you don't want to see. You go to when you're seeing behaviour that you do. You're, sticker charts, incentives, all of that. That doesn't work. My child ate his sticker chart, sticker by sticker, because he knew that once he got his stickers, he would get a head teacher's award. Well, he didn't want that. He didn't want to go up in an assembly. He didn't want to be looked at. So, you're all the while thinking, actually, I need to get him to a point where the incentive comes from him. He'll want to get in the bath because it's quite fun.
Or he might want a shower. Or he can't cope with either of them, and you're going to use wet wipes. You're going to do something.
Hose in the garden.
A hose in the garden. So that's once a year in the summer when it's hot enough. But it is about, and that's the thing, I often find that even if you look at the national curriculum, it's you can only answer a question in the way it's being prescribed. And I think when you're talking about the parenting, a bath is your prescribed way of getting clean.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the alternatives? And there's lots of things like that. I think someone's told you, or everyone has baths. They bath their kids. It's the way. It's the only way. And it's part of it is letting go of all of that as well.
Yeah, it is. It's letting go of all of that. That's exactly it. It's finding. I mean, somebody said to me yesterday, "You're quite creative, aren't you?" And I said, I suppose I am, actually, because you do. You find it's the metaphorical toolkit that I talk to our staff about. What else have you got in your toolkit? You're going to be carrying around these kind of metaphorical bags of different strategies, because what you did one day with a PDA child is not going to work the next day. They're really clever. Embrace that. Use it to your advantage if you can. If you need them to do something, you can be really clear about there are certain non-negotiables, but these are. If you treat that young person as somebody who is in charge of their own destiny and knows what they need, they start to teach you. And that's a really, really lovely place to get to. So when I'm talking to my staff, I'm saying you are going to need to bring in a huge number of different creative ways of supporting your children to make the right choices, make good choices, make sensible choices, and understand when their behaviour has stepped over a line, even though they felt what they felt. And I'm so gratified to spend my time walking around the school. I see cool, I see calm, I see collected. When people come to visit, they're like, "Oh, it's awfully calm here." I'm like, good, because actually, you wouldn't expect that necessarily in a specialist provision for autistic young people, but it is. It does feel very calm because the staff are like, "Okay, you're okay, I'm okay," because they've been able to. I mean, the phrase I often use is "be the paramedic." I don't know what training paramedics go through, but it's remarkable. Have you ever been present when a paramedic has come into an emergency?
Yeah.
I worked with a young person who was going blue. They just couldn't breathe. She was in a wheelchair and she was she was really struggling with a very serious chest infection. And the paramedics came in, and there were lots of kind of flapping women around her, really very worried about her, very anxious about her. And the paramedics came in and went, "It's a lovely shade of lipstick. Do you usually go for the blue?" And I was like, "Oh, can't believe they said that." But actually what it did was she smiled. The young person smiled, and they took the pitch out of the room. They took that anxiety and they reduced it completely. And I can see my staff doing that now. They'll walk into an incident where a young person has become really dysregulated, turn the furniture over, and they'll go, "Oh, are we redecorating in here?" The table's probably not going to work as well that way up. And they remove the sting, they remove that drama and that sense of desperation and powerlessness, and create something really, really calm in which the learner can just unclench and lower their shoulders and realise that they are okay.
Ali Knowles talks about in the Ollie and his superpowers, like, you're not angry, your anger is playing up.
Yeah.
And I like that. And it's like the film Inside Out type thing. But when that child is throwing that room around, the child isn't. Their anger.
Yeah.
And the moment you say to them, "Oh, are we redecorating?" You're talking to the child underneath. You're talking to that person, not their anger.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some real power in that. And, I think it's often because we're quite adamant that we really only employ human beings at the school. And the human beings that we employ at the school are fallible. They are fallible. They have their own feelings and their own emotions and their own difficult mornings and pressures and worries and concerns. So sometimes they can come into school and they're not okay. And it becomes very, very difficult to access your own compassion when you are dysregulated yourself. So we talk a lot about accessing compassion at school, and being able to see underneath the face of behaviour. Yes, I know the face is angry. What's underneath it? And my staff will definitely tell you that I repeat this story over and over again, but the wolf in the woods story, which is,
I was hoping that was the story.
Were you?
I like it.
A billion times. But if you're walking through the woods and you as a human being are feeling really wonderful, the birds are singing, there's dappled sunlight, it's a lovely, lovely day. But actually you come across a wolf and it's hunkered down and it's snarling at you. How are you feeling? And I've done this to rooms full of people and they're like, oh, worried. Some people go, oh, goosebumpy, I'm scared, I'm looking for a place to run, And I said, if you take 2 steps to the left, you can see the wolf's got its leg in a trap. How are you feeling now? And almost all of them do that, sympathetic head tilt. Because actually, oh my goodness, it's hurt. That's why it's snarling at me. And if you can access that compassion when you're working with a young person who is presenting you with a face that says, I'm not coping, I can't do this. If you can access that compassion, you are much, much more effective at being able to say, I'm here, I've got you, you're okay. The wolf's still got teeth. What are you going to do? So some people are like, well, I'm going to help it. I might get somebody to hold and reassure whilst I'm freeing them. Like, great. That's what you need to be doing when you're working with young people who are dysregulated. Find a way to protect yourself whilst making sure that they have a way out. Yeah.
So you mentioned like your staff come in and you're not always dysregulated when you come into work, but do your staff share that with the children? Maybe not the reason they're dysregulated, but are they sharing, I'm dysregulated and I'm having a bad day?
Yeah. And, it depends with the child you're working with, because some children would be absolutely gleeful to hear that and might then sort of start pressing buttons to see if they can
tip the edge.
bring about a reaction. But actually, I walk around the school and I see that kind of early morning nurture response. So actually we get together in the morning with our young people before lessons start. Are you okay? Am I okay? How's everybody doing today? And everybody takes a turn. The younger ones have got one of those beautiful rugs which have got different faces on, and they can go and stand on one of the faces that tells people how they're feeling. The older ones obviously just have a chat. But check-in and the being able to just have a sense of where everybody's at allows us then to intervene as adults and say, well, it sounds like you've had a really difficult morning. Why don't we head off to the dining room and have a bit of toast before you make a start? Or why don't we go for a little walk? Or do you want 10 minutes on the swing? Because actually to enable that and allow that freedom to just get back to a regulated place means that the lesson is going to be far more productive. It's going to be far better and far easier for all the young people to participate. So, I think we are very, very, very lucky to have a school that has the freedom to enable students to go out and bomb about. And we've got some lovely green spaces, and you'll often find them up the top of the climbing frame, because maybe a young person just needs to be alone, and that's where they do it, right at the top of the climbing frame, and they'll be there for a little while and then they'll come back. But I think sometimes the pressure of, right, our lesson starts now, I have an expectation that everybody's going to be front and centre with their books open. It's just too much for a child with PDA. They just can't comply with that. It's not possible for them. It would create such a river of anxiety for them. And we all know when we become overwhelmed that we behave inappropriately. We've probably all learned not to do that quite as much now as adults. But
some of us,
the truth is, some of us, yes. But when you're dysregulated, you need to employ your strategies, don't you?
But as I say, we have our strategy, so we might be doing it, but we have a more socially acceptable strategy in dealing with it.
Yeah.
And I think as part of it is that modelling, that being able to show children that it's not that as you get older, you're always regulated.
No.
It's not you learn how to cope with everything. It's you are going to have things you cannot cope with, and that will come at you when you at least expect them. And it's like showing that you have been upset, but you're kind of dealing with it, and they can see that, oh, actually. And it goes back, you talked before we were recording about, Beth, when you worked in a school for deaf children.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a really interesting. Do you want to say the story?
Yeah. So what I try and do at the school is create a really diverse workforce of people who represent autistic adulthood. I am myself diagnosed autistic only a couple of years ago, and I consider it to be incredibly important, because when I worked with deaf people years and years ago, one young lady signed to me. She said, when I grow up, am I going to be hearing? And I said, oh, why do you say that? We were signing to each other. Why do you say you're going to be hearing? She said, all adults are hearing. So her parents were hearing, her support at school was hearing, her teachers were all hearing. I was like, my goodness, she's never seen herself in adults. And role modelling became a huge priority for me at that point. So we now have a team of people who are role modelling all the time, whether they are on the spectrum or not. We do have a number of staff who are, and a number of staff who have different neurodiversities, dyslexia and ADHD and various others. But our job as a staff body is to model for young people, to say, oh, I've had a really difficult morning this morning and I feel like I'm not ready to work. I might just go and have a little cup of tea and a calm down, or I'm going to just do some breathing. And I see staff breathing with students, like doing that breathing exercise. I'm going to get back to a place, what's our shoulders doing? Just because actually if they practice it, demonstrate it, role model it, it becomes embedded in a learner's way of being. It's really powerful.
And it's also, sometimes it's, and I've had this with my daughter where she's on the spectrum and she suddenly needs something and she finds out in the moment when she suddenly needs it.
Yes.
And I generally will try but there are times where you just can't. And she's like, well, I need it. And we kind of get into it. And I'm literally, I have to say to her afterwards, look, it made me feel, and I let her know that maybe I feel the way she makes me feel sometimes, is letting her know that she can have a negative impact on me. I'm not a superhero. Or anything. It's you do those things, you lash out to me because you haven't got your way. That makes me feel bad.
But it's that conversation that's the most powerful thing. The reflective conversation after an event or after an incident. That's the bit where the learning really happens. That ability to kind of hold a mirror up to a young person and say,
when they're calm.
This is the real. When they're calm. Absolutely. When they're calm and when they're ready, actually, this is what I was thinking and feeling at the time. I mean, I'll often say to a young person, Oh, it's nice to see you today. I was worried about you yesterday. It was a real tough day for you, wasn't it? Instead of, shall we have a reflection?
Yeah, no, on my terms, because I'm angry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the beauty of relational practice, that actually you've got people who they really genuinely believe care about them, have witnessed them in their difficult moments. And what we have to remember is that when a young person's been really dysregulated, I mean, you think as a grown-up listening to this, there must have been times when you didn't behave your best self in your best way, and you'll be reflecting on that and probably feeling some shame and a little bit of embarrassment. We have to recognize that shame is probably very, very present in a young person who has done something, particularly if they've hurt somebody in a dysregulated moment, particularly if they've hurt one of their own friends. We really have to give them a way back from that. We have to. And that's what the reflection is all about. I saw you really struggle yesterday. I was really worried about you. And it must have been so difficult for you to have hurt somebody that you care about. How can we support you to repair that? Because everything can be fixed. We have to believe. I have to believe everything can be fixed, and everybody can get better and be better themselves, be their better selves. I have to believe that. So, even with our PDA young people, particularly with them actually, they might need that really oblique way of getting into a discussion so that they are able to reflect, because change is so difficult when you are caught in that trap of anxiety, which is, I think, what PDA is.
And that's where the core of relational practice, which in effect is co-regulation, is exceptionally powerful, isn't it? Is that you both climb into the well and then look for a route that both of you can get back out.
Yeah.
It's in it together. We're here for each other. Is really important, and it is. I think my wife had an experience of a similar thing, of somebody hurting someone else, not physically, but kind of emotionally hurting them, and they didn't know how they could get back. They didn't know what that path looked like. And you don't when you're a child. When you've done something, you've hurt your friend, you literally think it's all game over. I've ruined everything now. My life and it's just like, actually, is it as big a thing as you think? What is that first step? What is the second step? What's the third step? What will it look like afterwards? Will it return back to normal? Will it be as it was before? All those questions will make them all very anxious.
Yeah, I mean, and what I know from just doing the job that I do is that a lot of our young people can get very, very caught up in catastrophic thinking. They go to that worst case scenario. It's disastrous. It's all over. It's finished. I've ruined everything. I hear students say, I'm going to kill myself. It's an awful lot. And I'm like, we absolutely take that on, because it feels that they are expressing that desperation of what on earth happens next? What do I do next? So our job as staff and as parents for these young people is showing them the pathway back. What's the next step? And sometimes it is literally just sitting with them and validating their feeling. Sounds to me like you are in a really dark place at the moment. It sounds to me like you have massively struggled with what happened yesterday, and that you're feeling like things are really disastrous. What do you think might be the difference? What do you think might bring you back from that? What do you think I could do to make you feel like things can be repaired? Because I believe that everything can be. I have to believe that.
And it's a case of that once you've helped them back that first time, that you're building that connection with them, that you'll help them in that time. And kind of each time you do that, although generally the situation will be slightly different, that kind of the catastrophizing will reduce, the dysregulation will slowly reduce, because they know that support's there. They've got more confidence, more certainty that it can be resolved. And also, each time you do it, you probably give them an option of what could you have done? And it's that realization that, so there is another option, but I took, without realizing there was an option or whatever, I went down that route. But actually helping them see that there are choices, and they can maybe remove themselves from a situation instead of saying something or physically doing something. It's almost like you can save all of this by making that difference. But it takes time. You can't just, no one ever gets told something, don't do it that way, there's a better way, and listens.
That's
No
not
one
human
ever
nature.
does. No, when your parents say, don't get a credit card, you'll get yourself into debt, we all listened and never got a credit card.
Yeah. And then when you get back from Ibiza at 18, you understand. Yeah.
But only afterwards.
Yeah.
Only afterwards.
Experience is the mother of learning. Absolutely. But Beth, what would you say to a member of staff that came in and said, I've got a young person with PDA in the corner and I'm struggling to cope, but I've got another 6 children who need structure, routine, and I'm in inverted commas, more typically autism presentation.
Yeah,
What are the tools?
that's definitely a challenge. Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. I mean, what we know in this school is that the staff are immensely important. So actually, when a child is in the corner and really struggling, you can choose just to ignore them and allow them to remain there whilst you do what you're doing. What I do know about young people with neurodiversity is that even if they're kind of rolling around on the floor and playing with things and doing connects, they're listening to everything, they're taking in everything, they're remarkable, they absorb information. So I would often have a thought to saying, I can see that you are wanting to be in the corner at the moment, and that's great. I'm going to carry on the lesson, and when you're ready, you can just pop back to your desk, and just when you're ready. I suspect you're already listening, so you're not actually saying, can you listen, can you pay attention, can you come out of the corner? You're not giving any of those demands. I'm going to say, so I'm going to teach you something in a minute, and I know that such and such in the corner will tell me when I'm wrong. And they do, and it's brilliant because you know that they've heard everything that you've said. And I do love being contradicted by students. And sometimes I will put something on the board purposefully wrong because it's a really powerful way of checking that they are paying attention. You're like, did I get that wrong? I don't think I can have. I'm the teacher, you see, and you're just kind of joking all the time with them. If you invest in the battle with the child in the corner, then yeah, the whole thing gets derailed. All of it does. And actually won't bring about the outcome that you're looking for. The outcome you're looking for is that everybody will engage in learning and enjoy it. So sometimes the tactical ignoring of the child in the corner, but it gets more difficult when they are sort of purposefully disrupting the learning of others. But what I have experienced is that young people with autism, with a PDA diagnosis, will want to be sort of slightly elevated. They are the ones who care about that hierarchy. Really interesting. And so they're the ones who I might need to help me do such and such, or help me. I don't know how I'm connecting this computer. I can't do it. I need help. And they're the ones who will usually come and support. So it's making your language so oblique and indirect that actually the young person with the diagnosis of PDA, I'm working really hard not to use young people with autism, because it's autistic young people, and that's a really accepted way of saying it now, and I'm trying really hard to get that right. But a PDA child will often need to feel like they have something over the others in order to make them feel secure. It's very difficult to use the word manipulative. I hate that word. I really hate that word because it's got such negative connotations. But actually, what they're doing is trying to manipulate an outcome in order that they feel safer. And that's a really important thing to remember when you've got a child trying to wrest control.
I love the way you just touched on what does listening look like. And the answer is we have no idea. And one thing I do regret as a parent, I remember my children were young and you're trying to tell them what they did wrong or something. You're doing the modelling parent as you're being told, and they weren't really paying attention. So I used to try and get them to make eye contact, hands by their side, because that is where I know they're listening.
Oh,
what a complete idiot. But that's what I believe. That's what I was told. That's what you were told from your previous generations. If that is how you show you're listening. What I've learned, that is, I was the child who never listened, but the arrogant one who got every question right you threw at them.
Love those.
Yeah. So that thing when you're saying, I'm going, yeah, what listening looks like for me is not what it looks like for someone else.
No. And in fact, it's really funny because Ian and myself are both sitting here attending really well to this podcast. But if we were in a meeting with lots of other people, you could guarantee that we would be the ones either doodling, fidgeting something, Play-Doh, whatever. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
We're all holding up our fidget toys here.
All over my page.
This
So,
is torture.
actually, even Monet said, you've got to fidget to focus. We've got to move away from that really traditional expectation that students will be sitting facing front with their books and their pens. When I first started teaching here, I've told this story before, I've got one student who was practically horizontal, leaning back in his chair. There's another one with their hood up, with their head down on the desk, and another one underneath the table with a blanket over their head. And I was like, oh, yes. I'm home. I love teaching here. You can teach and there's a student bouncing up and down on their trampoline while they're doing it, because actually, why not? You've got a student who needs to spin in order to be able to focus. So, there's sort of the theory is that the situation itself is not causing you pain. It's how you think about the situation. And actually, I would urge parents and teachers who work with young people with PDA particularly to try and let go of all of the things that you think people are thinking. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people think of your parenting. You know that you're giving the child what they need. And when you give the child what they need, they can thrive and be their best selves. And that's more than you could ever imagine giving a child. It's so powerful. I use the word powerful a lot because it makes me goosebumpy. I get physiological reactions when I see children going from hiding under the table, hissing at people, like physically hissing at people, to being the young person who then does the parent tours for when parents come to visit the school.
Or leads the school play.
Or leads the school play. They have changed so much in their ability to be their authentic selves because they've been in a place where their authentic selves are celebrated and enjoyed. I've had parents come to me and say, nobody likes my child. Like, that's awful, isn't it? Isn't that awful that they've had that experience of nobody likes my child because they're not compliant? I love these kids. They are absolutely brilliant. They're just so brilliant.
But that's the thing. It's that compliant is the best word for it. And when he talked right at the beginning about those people tutting, it is this is the way you do things. This is the standard approach to parenting. This is what you do. Whereas as soon as you just go to the child, not in such a blunt way, but what is it you need, which is what you then work out from them, what it is they need, and then give them that, they thrive.
They do.
And I think if you think where our expectations of children come from, most of them are from the Victorian era, where actually we would still cut an arm off for a scratch because we hadn't got access to the medication we've got now. Things in every other walk of life have evolved and are evolving, and how we think about things have changed. We think about medicine differently. We think about psychology differently. But intrinsic in us seems to be the way that, and I think I mentioned in the last podcast, that education seems to be moving more to mainstream, certainly moving more towards a Victorian expectation on a child, when all of our knowledge proves quite the opposite. And it just baffles me at times.
I would love it if what you could do is almost say to all your staff, picture when you're at home, how you work best. Yeah. Think about where you are, what you're doing, how you're sitting, what's around you.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can imagine going into a room where every person had that.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be sofas with cats on, sofas with dogs on. There'll be somebody in a quiet office. And you literally, if you could arrange your classroom, so those with the desks, those on the sofas, those who, whatever it is in the kitchen at the break, if you could have that sort of arrangement in your classes, and it's like, go. And suddenly everyone is doing their best work.
Yeah, we see that's what we do have at Gretton. You can walk through and you can see the children who need the rocking chair and the children who need the wobble stool and the children who need the blankets and the children who need the ear defenders and the head teacher who needs the ear defenders, because I will often sit there with my ear defenders on and my Play-Doh. And my staff, even my team are like, Beth, where's your Play-Doh? You're being a nightmare. I'm like, I don't think I have ever been more authentic in a role than I have been in this school. Why would you not create that to get the best out of young people? I mean, I do get it. It's much more restrictive in the kind of mainstream expectation. But
because the problem is that you've read the first book of How to Parent, which tells you the Gina Ford. Her second book was How to Teach, and it's just the same sort of thing. This is how you teach, and everyone learns this way. You just forgot you read that book, and you've tried a different way.
And actually, it's really fun to teach in a different way. I mean, we got our kids. One of our teachers who's not here anymore, but he got some young people out in January with spades and said, "Come on, we're going to dig some trenches." And they were trying to dig in this really, really hard ground. And then he went back and did the sort of World War I lesson, and they just got it. That experiential learning. They won't forget it. It's fixed in their mind. They still talk about it now. Experiential learning, inquiry-led learning is a brilliant way to teach these young people, particularly with PDA. Ask them a question and see where they go with it. Because I can see young people with PDA often really crippled by the number of choices that exist in their head. You can ask them a question and suddenly it branches out into 1,000 different options. But actually, if you harness the power of that to be creative, my goodness, you've got some ideas there. These kids in their student council, what about this? What about this? What about this? I mean, the power of it, switching it into something positive instead of something to contend with in a teaching role. The way you think about it just changes the way it feels.
And it's all about stepping away from what you're told to do to what feels right between you and that young person to help them succeed.
I mean, sorry is a really interesting thing. Do you remember the times when you say, right, you say you're sorry? Do you remember that? Have you ever experienced that?
Well, that's my childhood, Beth.
Well, I know, and you're not sorry now, are you? The truth is, if you say to somebody, you say you're sorry, it becomes a power struggle, doesn't it? They say sorry, they've given something up to you. We talk about sorry here as a bridge. I'm going to put the S and the O in. You'll put the R and the Y in, and then because the middle R just won't go in unless we've built our parts of the bridge. They'll just fall into the water. Sorry is a bridge building word. Sorry is expressing sorrow that something happened. It's not giving up power. It's not relinquishing control. And once you start talking about repair in that way with young people with PDA, they start to see how important their part in it is.
Sorry is a really interesting word because I like that. I like that thinking around it. For me, one of the things that my daughter struggled with, it's kind of if they said sorry, to them that was admitting guilt.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like, but you're not.
No.
If someone's parent and you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," you feeling, you understand they're hurt, and you don't want them to be hurt. That's what sorry really means, and it is helping them understand. Because won't say sorry. Why? Because it means I did it. It's like, well, but did you do it intentionally? No. So that's kind of the whole thing, and
that's when language gets really clever, isn't it? I'm sorry for the impact that it had.
Yeah.
But I didn't do it on purpose and I didn't have intent. And we separate that out a lot with the young people here, that actually, Ian, you've got that lovely phrase, isn't it? If you do something wrong with the right intentions, nobody's going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. It's when you do something with the wrong intentions that we've got a problem.
And that's a really important message for the children, but equally for the staff, because we want you to take risks with the kids. We don't want you to break any or kill any, but we want you to take risks because that's the only way we're going to be able to stretch what we do here. And if you get it wrong, but you had all the right intentions and had very reasonably tried to mitigate those risks, then we'll support you and we'll put it back together and we'll start again. But if you've got a negative intention and you've got it wrong for the wrong reason, because you've been lazy, because you didn't plan it, then we'll come down on you. But please accept this as permission to take risks with the kids because that's what they need.
And the other bit with sorry I use at home was I said, what does sorry mean? And my daughter back went, it means you're not going to do it again, or you're going to try not to do it again. Because if every time I do something I say sorry, I'm just saying a word. There's no meaning behind it. Whereas if I've done something when you got hurt and I didn't realize and I say sorry, I'm going to kind of think about it next time to not do that. Or if I'm going to do it, make sure you're not going to get hurt or something. Sorry is such a huge concept.
Really tough word, actually. I remember one time that my son spat at me. It happens. It did happen. It doesn't happen anymore. And I was really upset. I walked away from him. Of course, I was upset. We'd got things wrong. I walked away from him, and he came downstairs about an hour later, and I was just standing at the kitchen side, and he came up behind me, put his head on my shoulder, and then he just put a tissue on my nose. That was enough. That absolutely was enough. He can't speak, but that was his sorry, and it was really, really powerful sorry. And we were able to talk about it, or I talk at him and he nods and makes faces, because that's how we communicate now. But actually, it's sometimes giving a young person who feels that awful shame of action a way to express that sorrow in a way that doesn't feel like they're giving ground somehow.
And sometimes it does take that that happened when they're dysregulated. They've come down and just gone, oh my gosh, what have I done? And my daughter does that. My daughter will go off and you're literally going, I'm not going to deal with that because I don't think I'll win anything on that one. And then she comes back an hour later and apologizes. And it's like, but partly it does that maybe because you've apologized, because you've shown them what that means. There's been modeling. There's been all these things where you've made mistakes and you've said sorry and the world didn't fall apart. And you're letting them know it's fine to say sorry, and it's a great way of letting someone know that you didn't mean for it to happen.
And I think it's really so. If a significant incident happens in the school, all eyes are on actually what was the outcome of that. The child did this. My first question is always, what did the staff do in the lead up to that? Not because I want to blame anyone. I'm not shifting blame or blaming staff. It's like, actually, we need to find the part at which we both got it wrong, because one didn't happen without the other. There were things that maybe were missed that we know about that young person that we should have been doing, which would probably have diverted that incident away from where it ended up. We need to own that, because that's the opening gambit in the conversation after the event. When the child's calm, maybe the next day, we need to open with, do you know what? Here's all the things that we should have done and we didn't. So we put you in a really difficult position. Now we need to talk about actually how you responded to that. Because it's not about the thing, it's about what did we all do to get you to that position, and how do we avoid it in the future, and what have we all learned.
I mean, there's that lovely book, The Explosive Child, and there's a line in that which says, children will do well if they can. They want to do well. There is you just know they do. Nobody wants to be disliked, punished. We've had young people come to the school before now, and they said, don't use that word, and they write it down, and it's school. And you go, oh, you don't like that word? And they go, no, because it's a really bad place, where they've always been unhappy. I've had young people say, don't use my name, because I've only ever heard it in anger. Right, so we have to reshift our language. We have to change our language in order to change that narrative for them. We just have to. And that's our responsibility as parents and as professionals, if we believe that young people with that diagnosis or that profile are behaving that way because they are afraid.
Definitely. And I'm going to wrap it up there. It's one of those podcasts where we started talking about 15 minutes and now we've gone well over an hour. But I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
So thank you both for coming on the show today. As always, you'll find details to contact Beth and Ian and find out about Gretton School in the show notes. And Beth shared some links with me as well. And as always, you'll find those wherever you listen to the podcast in the show notes or on the Sendcast website. If you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics, or anything else, please send us a message on social media or send an email to hello@thesendcast.com. The Sendcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We are here to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we can help schools do this for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have frameworks to suit all abilities from birth all the way through to 25. So our Steps for Life framework, for example, assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And for the most complex learners working with the engagement model, our engagement steps can build a profile of the student's needs and show the progress they are making. We've got stuff for early years and primary and so on. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sendcast. This is goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me too. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
You are welcome.
And for me too. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You are welcome. Bye, everyone.